Welcome to Media News. The focus of today's podcast is the nature of enforced disappearances of the Baluch in East Baluchistan and Pakistan and wider human rights violations taking place there. It will also be focusing on the initiatives of the Voice for Baluch Missing Persons, a movement that was set up by relatives of the disappeared from Baluchistan. I'm Desmond Fernandes, a former senior lecturer in human geography at De Montfort University in the UK, who specialises in genocide studies, human rights concerns, and an examination of the manner in which othered communities are criminalised by state-linked mechanisms and bodies. I'm also the author and co-author of a number of books and articles focusing on genocide as well as the human rights situation in Pakistan and the situation relating to the Baluch in Baluchistan. The books I've authored or co-authored include Education, Human Rights Violations in Pakistan and the Scandal Involving the United Nations' Refugee Agency and Christian Asylum Seekers in Thailand, The Targeting of Minority Others in Pakistan and the Education System in Pakistan, Discrimination and the Targeting of the Other. In today's podcast, I take great pleasure in welcoming Shahzavar Karimzadi, a Baluch economist, human rights activist and senior lecturer at the University of Hertfordshire in England. Welcome, Shahzavar. Shahzavar is the author of several books, including Methodology of Deception, Dialectic of Regressive Errors, and Money and Its Origins. Shahzavar, in today's podcast, will also be sharing his perspectives on the nature of enforced disappearances of the Baluch in East Baluchistan and Pakistan, human rights violations there, and the initiatives of the Voice for Baluch Missing Persons. He will also be providing a historical backdrop relating to the partition of Baluchistan. Shahzavar will also be explaining why many Baluch also find the usage of the very term Pakistan offensive, given its literal meaning, which separates a clean nation from an unclean one within a state-bounded structure. People need to be aware, he argues, of what Pakistan actually means, and they need to appreciate that it is, he points out, a bigoted term in itself, which explains why so many Baluch consider it to be offensive to even be termed Pakistani. Now, before Shahzavar presents his perspectives, I would just like to present the political context in which enforced disappearances have been taking place in eastern Baluchistan and Pakistan. According to the United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner, that's OHCHR, an enforced disappearance is defined by three cumulative elements. Firstly, deprivation of liberty against the will of the person. Secondly, involvement of government officials, at least by acquiescence. And thirdly, refusal to acknowledge the deprivation of liberty or concealment of the fate or whereabouts of the disappeared person. Very rarely have Baluch human rights issues been covered in the mainstream UK and US media, but recently, with the mysterious death of Karima Baluch, a well-known Baluch human rights and political activist in Canada, and with a Guardian feature-length article about enforced disappearances in Baluchistan and Pakistan in December last year, and with coverage of a sit-in protest by relatives of the disappeared of 13 Baluch families in Pakistan's capital Islamabad, which led to the Prime Minister of Pakistan agreeing to meet with their representatives on the 15th of this month, where he reportedly stated that the government's bill to criminalise enforced disappearances would be fast-tracked. There have been brief moments when public attention has focused on what many human rights analysts and Baluch human rights groups refer to as Pakistan's ongoing kill and dump policy in Baluchistan. Baluch diaspora groups have organised regular protests in the US and Europe to highlight what they refer to as an ongoing genocide of the Baluch and war crimes in Baluchistan, which includes a high number of enforced disappearances, an attack on Baluch culture and its language, forced dispossession, initiatives to settle other populations in the region, and a state policy of terror, unbridled terror, which denies the Baluch the right to a referendum concerning whether they desire self-determination or not. Now, it's important within the Baluch context to note that the issue of self-determination and a referendum is a central concern voiced by many Baluch, who point out that a declaration of independence of Baluchistan in August 1947 after the end of former British rule in the region, was reversed by Pakistan's state policy, which led to the annexation and occupation, as they define it, of Baluchistan. Successive Pakistan governments and official state narratives have, we should point out, denied and contested any such notions of genocide, occupation, war crimes, crimes against humanity, annexation, or a kill and dump policy. Raphael Lemkin, who coined the neologism genocide in Axis rule in occupied Europe in 1944, defined genocide as follows. Generally speaking, genocide does not necessarily mean the immediate destruction of a nation, except when accomplished by mass killings of all members of a nation. It is intended rather to signify a coordinated plan of different actions aiming at the destruction of essential foundations of the life of national groups, with the aim of annihilating the groups themselves. The objectives of such a plan would be the disintegration of the political and economic institutions, of culture, language, national feelings, religion, and the economic existence of national groups, and the destruction of the personal security, liberty, health, dignity, and even the lives of the individuals belonging to such groups. Lemkin added that genocide has two phases: one, destruction of the national pattern of the oppressed group; the other, the imposition of the national pattern of the oppressor. In the context of what has been happening and is happening in Baluchistan, Lemkin's perspectives are arguably relevant. The genocide scholars Michael McDonnell and Dirk Moses, for example, point out that Lemkin was effectively arguing that occupations and settlements conducted on certain terms, that is, without recognition of indigenous rights and subsequent negotiations, were bound to issue in genocide because resistance was as inevitable as its brutal suppression. Not all of Lemkin's concepts, we should note, made it into the United Nations Genocide Convention, but his wider conceptualizations are still widely used in human rights contexts to describe and assess human rights violations taking place today. To the genocide scholars Jennifer Balint and Israel Chani, the Genocide Convention has not been accepted as the last word on the definition of genocide. The definition of the crime of genocide has provoked much scholarly and legal argument, they state. However, it is worth noting that the Genocide Convention placed intent as a key motivating factor that had to be proven and discerned, and it minimised the cultural aspects that Lemkin had comprehensively identified. The targeting of political groups was also not explicitly identified in the definition used in the Genocide Convention. As already clarified, even as a wide number of human rights organisations, groups, academics, and Baluch people suggest and state that they're experiencing genocide, official Pakistan state narratives and pronouncements do not acknowledge that war crimes, crimes against humanity, or genocide in any formulated context have taken place in Baluchistan. Despite such denials, however, and this is obviously the subject of today's podcast in examining the issue of enforced disappearances, it is worth pointing out the following. According to Genocide Watch in 2012, and I quote, "The Pakistani government has carried out a cultural onslaught in the region, targeting educated professionals such as Baluch historians, healthcare professionals and journalists. The inability of the Pakistan government to rein in its military and protect its people is a big human rights concern. In light of these violations, Genocide Watch concluded that Pakistan remained at risk stage level 7 because of these indicators," end quote. Gregory Stanton from Genocide Watch defines stage 7 as extermination in current massacres, and he noted that in this stage, and I quote, "extermination begins and quickly becomes the mass killing legally called genocide. It is extermination to the killers because they do not believe their victims to be fully human. When it is sponsored by the state, the armed forces often work with militias to do the killing. Sometimes the genocide results in revenge killings," end quote. On the 18th of January 2014, the Pakistan Christian Post reported that Dr. Nazir Bhatti, the chief of the Pakistan Christian Congress, had also expressed his grave concern over the manner in which the Sri Lanka plan for the Tamil Tiger genocide was being proposed for Pakistan's security policy. On the 22nd of November 2017, Baluchwana News reported that, and I quote, "A Pakistani minister in Baluchistan has said that genocide is the only effective solution to address security issues." Home Minister Sarfaraz Bukti, during a meeting with local elders in Dera Bukti, said, "To save the future generations and for a prosperous Pakistan, there is no other option but to carry out genocide of terrorists." Several Pakistani Urdu dailies, which otherwise remain silent on the Baluchistan conflict, have printed the statement of Sarfaraz Bukti, in which he also claimed that previously Baluchistan was a no-go area, but the current government has succeeded in clearing the no-go areas. Sarfaraz Bukti also heads a Pakistan army-backed death squad in the name of Bukti Aman Force, who regularly abducted and killed pro-freedom Baluch activists and their family members. End quote. Here it should also be noted that terrorists has been a designation that has been used by the Pakistan military and authorities in the past and present, as noted by human rights campaigners, political analysts, Baluch civil rights campaigners and relatives of the disappeared and lawyers, to cover up crimes of targeting against civilians. It is notable that the current Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, when leading his party in opposition in February 2016, had promised that he would act differently with regard to Baluchistan if he came to power, as he understood the full scale of injustice and, as he termed it, and I quote, "the crimes against humanity that the Baluch experienced." As reported by the Pakistan Tribune newspaper, he stated, and I quote, "I will never start a military operation in your province, but will respect your right to protest," end quote. In a speech uploaded on YouTube on the 26th of January that same year, he's heard passionately stating before an audience, and I quote Imran Khan here, "I, in 1971, when the Pakistani army took action in East Pakistan, I was the one who was standing with the Pakistani army, praising the soldiers. They're doing this and great job, and it's only foreigners, terrorists and militants who are being targeted. It was 3 years later that we realised that the army butchered civilians, women and children, and so we're doing exactly the same thing in Baluchistan. They are bombing people. How can you bomb people? Is this an army that you're bombing? There are women and children there. But for us, it's very important to understand how we're just bombing our own people. Just think of the immorality of bombing villages where there are women and children," end quote. Note here that Imran Khan recognised that the people being referred to as only foreigners, terrorists and militants who were being targeted by the Pakistani army, he later discovered, were butchered civilians, women and children, as he termed it, own people, as he came to realise. In that same speech, which had also considered the plight of people in the tribal belt, he added, and it is of relevance to the podcast today, and I quote, "And the extrajudicial killing that is going on, how many times have you heard about so many militants killed? Is there any verification? Has there been any identification? Who are these people that have died? So this is a crime against humanity, what is going on," end quote. Since Imran Khan became Prime Minister, of course, the army, as many human rights reports have confirmed, has continued to do the very same things that it was doing in 2016 when he made these statements. On the 14th of December last year, Hannah Ellis-Peterson in The Guardian reported that, and I quote, "In opposition, Imran Khan repeatedly pledged to end the practice, but since he became Prime Minister in 2018, the disappearances have continued, some say escalated, whilst accountability seems as elusive as ever," end quote. Fiona Nybart from Genocide Watch on the 15th of August last year reported that, and I quote, "Prime Minister Imran Khan's government has cracked down on journalists, activists, non-governmental organisations and the political opposition. Arbitrary detentions and extrajudicial killings by law enforcement agencies continue with impunity. Human rights advocates live under constant threat of arrest. The Pakistan Intelligence Service, ISI, is a state within a state. unrestrained by law. Pakistan is currently at stage 6, polarization in the 10 stages of genocide. End quote. In mid-September last year, the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization, UNPO, asserted that, and I quote, Pakistan has long been labelled as one of the most dangerous countries for reporters. Now, since Imran Khan became Prime Minister, the military's influence on the government has grown, as has the administration's aversion to criticism, advocates and Pakistani reporters say. Between May 2019 and April 2020, there have been more than 90 cases of attacks and violations against members of the press in Pakistan, according to a report by Freedom Network. 7 were killed and more incidents were reported after the study was released, including 2 murders in the southwestern province of Baluchistan. Shockingly, the state and its functionaries have emerged as the principal threat actor wielding the biggest stick to browbeat the media into submission and growing silence, Freedom Network's director said. End quote. Now, Tariq Khosa, a former chief of police in Baluchistan and the author of The Faltering State and Inconvenient Truths, acknowledged and noted the following in a 20th June article in Pakistan's Dawn newspaper last year. And I quote, Sardar Akhtar Mengal, chief of the Baluchistan National Party Mengal, announced his decision to quit the ruling coalition, causing a setback to the PTI government. That's Imran Khan's government. The latest voice of dissent does not augur well for the nation. The government has been accused of displaying a non-serious attitude towards Baluchistan's problems and of failing to implement the 2 agreements arrived at with the PTI leadership before the formation of the government soon after the 2018 polls. 2 pressing issues referred to by Mengal during his speech focused on missing persons and non-implementation of the Counter-Terrorism National Action Plan. By not attempting to heal Baluchistan's wounds, the powers have unleashed anger and anguish amongst the Baluch. Top of the list is the issue of missing persons. Our 2 premier civil and military-led intelligence agencies have operated without a legal framework for too long. They must be made accountable to the law and Parliament. 2 previous attempts by civilian governments to bring federal intelligence agencies within the ambit of the law were scuttled. The Commission of Inquiry on Enforced Disappearances has been an utter failure. Pakistan has failed to enact a law on enforced disappearances despite international commitments. The state has lost credibility, end quote. And Reuters noted on the 20th of July last year that when he led the BNP-M into an alliance with Mr. Khan's coalition 2 years ago, Akhtar Mengal gave the government a list of 5,128 missing persons. Since then, over 450 people on the list have been found or returned to their families, but during the same period, Mengal states another 1,800 were reported to have disappeared. If you cannot recover people, at least stop disappearing more people, he said. Mama Kadir, who heads a group called the Voice for Baluch Missing Persons, keeps his own count. In the last 6 months, the number of Baluch missing persons has risen, he said, end quote. And again, I.A. Rahman, writing in Pakistan's Dawn newspaper on the 4th of June last year, also emphasised that the need to address the issue of disappearances is clear. For years, the United Nations Working Group on Enforced Disappearances has been calling upon the government to reconstitute the present commission, increase its financial and human resources, and declare enforced disappearance a criminal offence. The government must also release the 2010 report prepared by 3 retired judges that will reveal how disappearances are effected and by whom. It is also time Pakistan ratified the UN Convention on the subject, end quote. And again, looking at issues of definition and scholars who have considered this issue, Zeus Hans Mendes, writing in the Journal of Indo-Pacific Affairs last year, concluded, and I quote, that whilst some may perceive claims of genocide as exaggerations, they are not baseless, and certain activities currently occurring in Baluchistan lend support to such accusations. There are 2 primary methods of repression adopted by the Pakistani state: bribes and all-out bludgeoning of the Baluch. The military has thus been accused of destroying and depopulating Baluch, as well as being responsible for a multitude of forced disappearances in urban and rural Baluchistan, end quote. Now, Mendes is the Centre Coordinator of the Centre for Security Studies at the Jindal School of International Affairs, OP Jindal Global University. Relevant passages from his 2020 paper include the following, and I quote, "Since the protests on the 11th of June 2020, reports have shown a significant increase in the number of enforced disappearances, raids and arrests being carried out by the Pakistani security forces. The Pakistani state's repression against the Baluch is in fact intensifying. According to the Human Rights Council of Baluchistan, the attacks and military raids against the Baluch have also significantly increased, especially during the COVID-19 lockdown. Already deprived of the resources and repressed by the Pakistani state, it is likely that the Baluch may soon become a marginalized population in their own land. With the military becoming more oppressive, the cases of enforced disappearances mounting daily, it has become evident that the Baluch are running out of time," end quote. According to the Voice of Baluch last year, the Baluch suffering doesn't end there. There is a great crisis of internally displaced persons, IDPs, in Pakistan, a large part of whom remain ethnically Baluch. The IDPs not only live in appalling conditions, but the Pakistani government, including the deep state, controlled by the military establishment, also forbids international humanitarian organizations from helping these displaced people. The intelligence agencies and other security institutions continue to haunt the already suffering Baluch IDPs to this day. And it's for these types of reasons that in a protest outside the United Nations building in Geneva last year, Naila Kadri Baluch, president of the World Baluch Women's Forum, said, "It's almost 70 years, the United Nations is standing here, and it's almost 70 years that Pakistan has occupied Baluchistan and they're perpetrating our genocide. Actually, what's going on in Baluchistan can be described in one word, that is genocide. They're using rape as a tool of oppression. They're taking our women. They are torturing them. This is the time the UN should understand and feel a responsibility to come to Baluchistan and intervene. The UN should monitor what's going on in Baluchistan. So we are living in occupied land. We are living in a hell that is made by the state of Pakistan. There should be an intervention by the UN in Baluchistan, and there should be fact-finding missions because there are mass graves. More than 40,000 people are missing. Our whole nation is in a Great Depression," she said. And she's also on record as stating in 2016, and I quote, and it is of relevance in today's podcast, "It has reached the level of genocide. There are 100 mass graves in Baluchistan. It is a war situation. They're combing our villages. They fire indiscriminately. They kill anything. 1-year-old babies, girls, women, anything living, even our cattle. They abduct women. They take women with them. They have rape cells. There are official torture cells. A journalist was abducted, he was tortured, and he witnessed a 25-year-old Baluch schoolteacher, Zarina Mari, in a rape cell. When he was released, he gave his report and testimony to Asian Human Rights Watch. They have abducted thousands of women. No one knows their whereabouts. They are using rape and dishonor as an instrument to crush a nation. It is a freedom struggle. We were occupied by Pakistan on March the 27th, 1948. In evidence, we have been fighting against Pakistan to free ourselves. Pakistan has created local Al-Qaeda and ISIS groups in Baluchistan. Pakistan created these groups the way it created Al-Shams and Al-Badr in Bangladesh to massacre Bangladeshi nationalists. These groups are mostly non-Baluch, and after killing Baluch people, they go back to Pakistani barracks." And historically, she quoted, and again I quote from her, "An independent country was occupied. Baluchistan as a nation state was formed in 1410. It is the fourth Kurdish state. The first was Mesopotamia. When Pakistan attacked Baluchistan, we already had a parliament. We had a House of Commons and a House of Lords. We had our boundaries, our constitution and rule of law. Our constitution was written way before Pakistan's constitution came into existence. Pakistan is an artificial state created by the British. It is a test tube country. People talk about Westphalian nation states. What about our nation state? Why was it occupied? Why did no one raise any objection? Because it was an imperialist plan to divide India, to leave India weak, to create problems for India all around its borders. The British left the Indian subcontinent physically, but they ensured that the people in the subcontinent continued fighting with each other and not become a strong power in the world. Baluchistan and Kashmir are not the same. The instrument of accession was offered to princely states. Baluchistan was not a princely state, it was an independent country. The parts of Baluchistan under the British were given to them on a lease, a contract. British Baluchistan was a separate entity from British India and had nothing to do with India. When the British decided to quit after creating two nations, they declared on August the 11th, 1947 through All India Radio and newspapers that parts of Baluchistan under the British are free. When the British were still here, Jinnah offered his services as a lawyer to represent Baluchistan. He promised the Baluch people that Baluchistan would not be coerced to join either India or Pakistan. The Simon Commission recorded this. It is Jinnah's statement that Baluchistan was never a part of India or Pakistan, and it has always been an independent country. However, Jinnah knew that Baluchistan was divided into several parts, and its people were not in a position to consolidate to fight the Pakistan army. So Pakistan invaded us. It was Jinnah's conspiracy that he had worked on for years. After Pakistan came into being, it sent messages to the government of Baluchistan, asking us to join them. Why? The response was, because we are Muslims. So the bill was presented in our parliament. Both the houses rejected it. End quote. It is in this historical and current human rights laden and enforced disappearance context in which the Baluch and Baluchistan have been targeted, she explained, and I quote, "That is why we demand from the United Nations to intervene through its 2012 declaration against genocide. It is the duty of the UN to solve this issue peacefully. For that too, we need the support of India and the entire international community. We are facing genocide. As Pakistan and China signed the recent China-Pakistan Economic Corridor Agreement, human rights violations turned into ethnic cleansing and now genocide. They just want Baluch soil. They don't want Baluch people. The word corridor hurts because to them our country is just a corridor. That is how they look at us, to snatch our resources," end quote. And in addition to these types of genocide assertions, Annie News has reported how Mama Kadir Baluch, the vice chairman of the Voice for Baluch Missing Persons, on the 25th of May last year said, and I quote, "The Pakistani forces see coronavirus conditions as being more suitable to whisk away people in Baluchistan. Almost every family in Baluchistan has at least one family member missing, including females and children. We have a list of more than 350 females and 200 infants who are victims of involuntary disappearances," end quote. Pakistan's ex-ambassador to the United States and author Hussein Haqqani said, "The Baluch people are small in number and the Pakistani forces are eliminating them steadily. Some say that this is a genocide of the Baluch." Now, as Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, whilst expressing his extreme concern during his address to the UN in its general debate in the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly last year, stated that military occupation and illegal annexations are being flouted and set aside. However, while stating this, he failed to relate this to any acknowledgement regarding the case of Baluchistan in Pakistan. Instead, his criticism was directed, many would say hypocritically, at India's actions in Jammu and Kashmir. As Abdul Nawaz Bugti, an exiled Baluch journalist writing in the print magazine, observed, Imran Khan is proving that Pakistan's state policy is to lie and Baluchistan doesn't exist. PM Imran Khan is concerned about Kashmir in Palestine, but can't see atrocities against Baluch and Pashtuns in Pakistan. He showed grave concern for Kashmir in Palestine, while staying silent on the atrocities against Baluch and Pashtuns in Pakistan. He raged against India for the killing of Muslims with impunity, even as he pushed under the carpet the systematic genocide of Baluch people by his own army, which he had publicly spoken about and exposed before becoming the Prime Minister with the blessings of the mighty Pakistan Army. Imran Khan had previously admitted on many occasions that the Pakistan Army was bombing villages populated with women and children in Balochistan, as it did in Bangladesh. This makes one think whether lying through the teeth is the state policy of Pakistan, which has led to the public believing in those lies and living in a world far away from the reality." End quote. With reference to Imran Khan's earlier references before he became Pakistan's Prime Minister to the horrors that took place in East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, lest we forget, Donald Beechler confirms the following situation about what really transpired there. In March 1971, the Pakistani army launched a campaign to repress the independence movement of Bengalis in the eastern half of the geographically separated nation. The campaign of murder, rape and pillage that continued until December 1971 caused 1 to 3 million deaths. By some accounts, 200,000 Bengali women were raped. The International Commission of Jurists concluded that a campaign of genocide involved the indiscriminate killing of civilians, including women and children, and the poorest and weakest members of the community, the attempt to exterminate or drive out of the country a large part of the Hindu population, the arrest, torture and killing of Awami League activists and students, professionals, businessmen and other potential leaders amongst the Bengalis, the raping of women, and the destruction of villages and towns. End quote. The human rights campaigner and analyst Peter Tatchell, who has followed events in Balochistan for well over a decade, posed a key question which he then sought to answer, and this is of relevance to this whole debate about enforced disappearances. How did this oppression of the Baloch people come to pass? From 1876, part of what is now Balochistan was a self-governing British protectorate, the Khalat. It was never part of the British Indian Empire. In response to representations from Baloch leaders in the late 1940s, the British government agreed the Khalat state should become an independent nation and include other adjacent regions such as the Mari and Bugti tribal areas. In August 1947, coinciding with India's and Pakistan's independence, Balochistan also declared independence. Soon afterwards, Pakistan's founder, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who had previously supported a separate Baloch state, began strong-arming Balochistan into joining Pakistan. But both houses of the Baloch parliament rejected incorporation. Balochistan's independence was, alas, short-lived. Less than a year later, on the 1st of April 1948, Pakistani soldiers invaded and annexed the territory. At gunpoint, the arrested Baloch leader surrendered and was forced to sign an instrument of accession to merge with Pakistan. Khan was not mandated by the Baloch people to sign. They never voted to be part of Pakistan. To pacify the resentful Baloch, Jinnah promised semi-autonomy, but genuine self-government never happened. In response to a nascent insurgency, the 1973 Pakistan Constitution pledged provincial autonomy for Balochistan. Again, it never materialised. Moreover, troublesome democratically elected Baloch chief ministers have been dismissed from office and jailed by Islamabad. The Pakistan military have remained in Balochistan continuously since the 1948 invasion, blanketing the country with military garrisons to suppress the people. If the Baloch are happy and free, as Islamabad claims, why is there a need for this pervasive, suffocating military presence? And why has Pakistan always refused Balochistan a referendum on independence? Ever since its annexation in 1948, Balochistan has been subjected to a quadruple whammy of military occupation, political domination, economic exploitation and cultural hegemony. End quote. Now, Peter Tatchell's observations concerning the kill and dump policy have been that the intention of these assassinations is clear: to decapitate the Baloch nationalist leadership and to terrorise the Baloch people. To cover up its human rights abuses, Islamabad restricts media access to Balochistan and refuses to allow the UN and international aid agencies to provide humanitarian assistance to most parts of the region. Concerning these enforced disappearances, the Asia Human Rights Commission noted in 2013 that the disappearances are a result of the government using militaristic methods to solve the Balochi political conflict. legal and diplomatic methods are largely ignored, and rule of law has been hounded into non-existence by the military and intelligence agencies. The Asia Human Rights Commission in December 2013 pointed out that Pakistan had the highest number of forced disappearances in the world. And on the 8th of September, just last year, the International Commission of Jurists, the ICJ, noted that Pakistan's Commission of Inquiry into Forced Disappearances, constituted by the Pakistan government, in its current form, had enabled and entrenched impunity for enforced disappearances instead of providing redress to victims. The Commission has failed in holding even a single perpetrator of enforced disappearance responsible in its 9 years, said ICJ's Legal and Policy Director. A commission that does not address impunity nor facilitate justice for victims and their families can certainly not be considered effective, he concluded. And again, just to examine the extent to which enforced disappearances are taking place, Dr. Nazir Ahmed Mir noted at the end of May last year, and I quote, "The Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, the HRCP, has over the years condemned the Pakistan state for its dismal record in handling the cases of enforced disappearances in Balochistan and hinted at the involvement of state agencies in such cases. Media personalities taking up this issue have been coerced into silence. In August 2019, members of the HRCP lamented that the government of Pakistan has always treated Balochistan as a conflict zone from where truth does not see the light of day. The approach of mainstream media towards the province has been abysmal, and they refrain from reporting massive human rights violations for fear of reprisal. However, HRCP has reported about 47,000 Baloch who have gone missing or disappeared. According to the Hakpan organization, a Baloch human rights organization, 568 persons disappeared and 241 were killed by the Pakistan security forces in 2019 alone." End quote. The Voice for Baloch Missing Persons reportedly registered 667 cases of enforced disappearance and 116 of recovered mutilated bodies in 2016 alone. And in this context, protests in Balochistan and internationally by members of the Baloch community and their supporters continue. On the 20th of February this year, Pakistan's Dawn newspaper reported that a recent meeting of Pakistan's federal cabinet had expressed concern over the long-standing issue of missing persons. During the meeting, the Minister for Human Rights reportedly informed Prime Minister Imran Khan that a proposed bill to stop the disappearance of people had been lying with the Law Ministry for over 2 years, but nothing had been done about it. The Prime Minister at that point, Dawn reports, intervened and asked all stakeholders to sit together and proposed a consensus bill for necessary amendments to the relevant laws. And again, just before I lead the discussion into Shahzavar, it's worth just pointing out some of the perspectives of relatives of the disappeared themselves. Sami Baloch, a Baloch missing persons activist, at the end of June last year, detailed the trauma that so many relatives of the disappeared have to go through. And I quote, "At 1 a.m. on June the 20th, 2009, plainclothed armed men abducted my father. He was on night duty at a hospital. My sister and I have abandoned our childhood, our studies, our home, everything, to find him and secure his release. Nothing has worked. For years we have camped in front of press clubs in Quetta and Islamabad, clutching a portrait of my father. We have held hunger strikes and sit-ins. We have submitted his case to the Balochistan High Court and the Supreme Court. We have delivered legal testimony and presented eyewitnesses. In the apex court, now retired Justice Javed Iqbal once promised us that my father would be released within 10 days. That was over 10 years ago. In 2013, I joined other families of missing persons from Balochistan and marched from Quetta to Karachi and then to Islamabad. We walked 3,000 kilometers over 116 days. I've presented my father's case in front of every human rights organization in the country. I've gone to the UN. I've asked every major political figure in my province to help my father. I'm in contact with the Minister for Human Rights. Today, I'm sitting at the missing persons camp in front of the Quetta Press Club, marking the 11th anniversary of my father's disappearance. Our story is not unique. We are one amongst thousands of other families across Pakistan, searching for their loved ones. My family and I can no longer bear the heaviness of this weight. We're tired now. We've been struggling for 11 years, but no one seems to hear us. I've learnt that a lot of people speak about the Baluch missing persons issue for a bit, but then move on. They forget that families like mine cannot move on. Many talk of human rights, sometimes raise their voices for the smallest of issues, but ignore rampant enforced disappearances taking place across Pakistan. We were little girls when our father disappeared. I was 10 and my sister 8 years old. Now we are young women still awaiting his return. The more time passes, the more his life is in danger. I don't have words to express what my family continues to go through. Sometimes we'll hear rumours that raise our hopes, but when tortured bodies and mass graves continue turning up in Baluchistan, disappointment and helplessness return. I ask all those who feel any compassion for human rights and dignity in Pakistan to stand by us, the family of missing persons, and join their voices with ours. And she added, stand by me and help bring my father back, end these injustices. And these appeals continue. On the 9th of March this year, the Baluch Human Rights Council, BHRC, appealed to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva to intervene and send an investigating commission to observe some of the most pressing human rights situations in Baluchistan. And basically they appealed to the UN during its 46th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council. BHRC added that despite repeated requests from the Baluch Human Rights Council and other international human rights organisations for intervention in Baluchistan, the silence of the international community is incomprehensible. So I've really presented this extensive overview and a historical one, I think, because one needs to examine all these different perspectives and details before I turn to Shahzavar Karimzadi. And I now turn to Shahzavar. I know you've been researching into and evaluating and reporting on these issues for decades now. I know that many Baluch have an extreme reaction to the word Pakistan itself due to what we've just heard, and also due to what its literal meaning connotates, that is, the land of a clean nation, which directly suggests that its creation as a separate entity from India makes India the unclean nation state. As you have argued, the very term Pakistan is a bigoted term and statement when interpreted in this context, and you explain, Shahzavar, that many Baluch do not like being called Pakistani, even within this context that needs to be appreciated. You have also written substantively about the way that the nation state of Pakistan was created through the impulses of extremist fundamentalist ideologues and a party that was working in the interests of British imperialism, something that was also highlighted by one of the people I cited earlier. You and others have spoken of Pakistan being created and shaped by the British as an artificial imperialist construct. And in this sense, Baluchistan, as you state, and as others have stated in the podcast today, was annexed without due consultation with its peoples. You speak of the artificial Frankenstein state of Pakistan, created through these historical imperialist impulses by elite circles that therefore never considered the rights of peoples like the Baluch, the Sindhis, the Pashtun, or the Bengalis, who were included in the state. And in this sense, they have become disposable peoples. The very nature of the extremist state, as you've argued elsewhere, created through British imperialist and colonialist agendas that enable the genocide of people in East Pakistan, today's Bangladesh, has equally resulted in the military occupation and annexation of Baluchistan and repression and marginalisation of its people, paying scant regard to their calls and rights for self-determination. And again, as you and others have noted, resistance to this extremism practiced by the Pakistan state has, you have argued, resulted in Pakistan's kill and dump policy and its policy of deep state-directed enforced disappearances and the extreme violence against the Baluch population. And the movement created by relatives of the disappeared seeking justice and also mechanisms through which they can save or trace their relatives' whereabouts to try and do something to save them in the face of international inaction has also arisen as a consequence of these political developments. Can you, Shahzavar, at this point, please elaborate on these issues using your extensive knowledge in this matter, also providing a historical overview of the nature of the partition of Baluchistan, and also why have other states not held Pakistan to account? Thank you so much once again, Shahzavar.
First, thank you very much for inviting us to express our views about the situation in Baluchistan. I think before I'd answer directly to your question,
Yep.
let me just maybe clarify a couple of points, or to say, what happened in recent days.
Thank you.
Just when we are talking about, in the last couple of days, Aurangzeb Baloch, just 2 days ago, he was abducted and his body was found yesterday in Baluchistan. Okay, well, what we call it Eastern Occupied Baluchistan or Pakistan Occupied Baluchistan.
Yeah.
And also we had a large number of Baluch people were killed by Iranian security forces. It was on the 22nd of February 2021. Those are people that are just trying to make the crossing what they call it border, which is not a border, to sell some goods. So just remember those people. And a couple of other, I think one point we have to make it clear. You see, Baluchistan is one of the oldest nation in that region, and is in the plate of Iran. Is one of Iranian nations, like many other nations. So it's nothing to do with Indian subcontinent. As we get to Indus River, so the other side is India. This side they call it Iranian plateau. So it was, and since 1666, Baluchistan became independent. It was independent state until British they went to occupy Baluchistan in 1839, and as a result of that, they drew two lines. One is called Goldsmith Line, which was drawn in 1871, and they divided Baluchistan in two parts, Eastern and Western Baluchistan. And the Eastern Baluchistan was given to Qajar rulers, or the Turkish rulers of Persia at that time. And then there was another land drawn in 1893, is called Joran land, and that northern part of Baluchistan was given to Afghanistan. But since that time, Baluch and Pashtun, there were two nations that fought against British occupation or colonization of Baluchistan and the Pashtun area. So the Baluch were always there fighting for their rights to become independent. And the second point, before I get to the point, is insult to say to Baluch Pakistani is totally insult. I think we have to remember the term is a very, very offensive term. There is no such a thing as Pakistani nation. Is a very, very offensive term that some of the fundamentalist Indian Muslim, they came up with this idea of the Pakistan. Chaudhry Rahmat Ali in 1933, and he was a fundamentalist individual, fundamentalist Indian, who, like the rest of the Muslim fundamentalist Muslim in 1930s, they were supporting fascist movement, and they came up with this idea of the Pakistan. Pakistan, when you compare it to Hindustan, there are two terms. Hindustan, that means like Baluchistan, is the land of Baluch. Kurdistan is the land of Kurdish people. Okay, and it was Hindustan means the land of Indian. So they came up with this idea of the Pakistan. Pakistan, even those people that Punjabi, the rulers of Punjabi Muslim rulers of Pakistan, even they don't know. Pakistan is basically means is the land of clean. Okay, And for the Muslim, for the fundamentally Muslim, even though now they use it in textbooks, in Pakistani textbooks, that means Hindus are najas, that means filth. So it's a highly offensive term. So Baluch are not in this category. Baluch are, they've got their own homeland. Then it is an insult to Baluch to say that you're Pakistani. And whoever they say that one, I think is insulting us. So that when using this term, Pakistan is in Iranian languages, in Baluchi language, in Kurdish language, in Farsi, in Gilaki, in Dari language. And Pak means clean, Stan means the land, okay, where you're supposed to be part of means the land of clean nation, as opposed to land like Hindustan. So they regard Hindustan or the Hindu filthy, so they wanted to have a clean land, and they're exactly the same people. Okay, West Punjab is not any different from East Punjab. Okay, East Bengal is not any different from West Bengal. And there were two provinces of the India. The British, they divided and created this Frankenstein state. So please don't use the term and relate it to Baluch in relation to Pakistan, because it's totally insult to any decent human being, not just to the Baluch. Okay, coming back to the question, you see, since Baluchistan became independent, as you said, in 1947, and the news of independence Baluchistan was announced, in daily radio, and also on the it was you had it in news of New York Times.
Yeah.
That mentioned in New York Times that Baluchistan became independent. And the reason that, you see, there is irony, historical irony in it was Baluch employed Muhammad Ali Jinnah in mid-1930s for one reason, not for any other reason, to make sure that they have a lawyer, and this lawyer is going to defend the rights of the Baluch to become independent.
Yeah.
It was, you see, the Muslim or those organizations, they made up the like Muslim League or any other organization that in India they had the name of the Muslim, they're totally supported British Empire, British colonialism. And one of the first, you see, the first article of Muslim League states this organization is set up to defend the rights of British in India. So these people, they were not those when they created Pakistan, because Churchill in 1945 said, keep a bit of India. They never wanted India to become totally independent. So that's why they created this artificial state and took part of Punjab, the province, Indian province of Punjab, the western province, the western side of Punjab, and the eastern side of Bengal. And that was they created Pakistan. And it was nothing to do with Pashtun, it was nothing to do with the Sindhi. Of course, Baluch, they were totally, so they were fighting. So you just give me one evidence of any rulers of Punjabi Muslim who came to power, who fought for become independent. Is just a joke, in history. So when they created Pakistan, and it was meant for the British, because British wanted to have a base, and they believed that if they lose all India, that means they will lose all the power in Asia, because after that, you had all the problems in China and so forth. So they just wanted to keep part of that. And for decades, even for a century and a half, they're working very hard to create this monster. And it's part of any colonialism. So any colonialism, what they do, they try to have a base. So they create those mercenaries, they pay them. So since 1857, when the Indian started to protest against the British Empire. From that time, they invested a lot. The British invested a lot to take advantage of like the religious division, like always they do. At the moment they do it in Baluchistan, they do in Kurdistan or any other.
Yes, the classic divide and rule policy, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, divide and rule policy. So they invested a lot, and if you look at until 1857, the Indian army is called is basically mostly they come from south of India. But after that, they realized that because of the movement of the revolt of the Indian in 1857, and the Muslim from really the Punjab area, the Punjab, because Punjab, of course, you've got east and west. So the eastern part is their Sikh, and the western part, they're converting to Islam. And it's another story. We don't go that, because they didn't want to pay tax, and they converted to Islam. But because of that, then we see that in the First World War and Second War, the largest, the largest part of the Raj army, it comes from this area. It comes from West Punjab, the Muslim. So they really served. There was servitude, and there is no movement at all that to call, for independence. It wasn't like, the Indian Congress, which they called for independence. It was exactly, they used them as to suppress the Indian liberation movement. So it was for that reason they created. And for the Baluch, they have got nothing to do with, with India or to Punjab or anything. It's a nation that, is one of the oldest nations in that region. And the connection that we've got connection, of course, historically, we are close to Afghans, we are close to Fars, we are close to Gilaki, Mazandarini, to the Kurdish, historically. So it's one of the Iranian nations in that Iranian plateau. So, and Baluch, they fought for their rights. And it is recorded historically that they made life very, very difficult for the British colonizer. And that was one reason they divided Baluchistan in three parts. So when in 1946, 47, when Baluch were the first really nation in that region, they gained their independence. But the reason that, Baluch were occupied soon after that, remember Baluch, of course, they have their difficulties in a sense, they had weaknesses, and that's why the Punjabi establishment managed to occupy Baluchistan again. It was because Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who was a Gujarati, and kept changing his religion a few times. And you see, it's ironically that when he died at his place at home, the funeral was on the Shia basis, and states had the funeral on Sunni basis. And the whole thing is full of contradiction. Anyway, so Baluch, they employed Muhammad Ali Jinnah from 1936 to almost 1946, just for make sure that Baluchistan regain its independence. And of course, Baluchistan was kind of semi-colonized. It wasn't totally like a colonized nation of British. Anyhow, since the occupation of Baluchistan in 1948, you see in history of Baluchistan, there never been, in history of Baluchistan, there is no document to show that such extent of the brutality that people of Baluchistan experience in the hands of the British creation of this Frankenstein state of Pakistan, the first Muslim state, the British created or British Muslim state of Pakistan, and also since the Islamic regime of Iran was created. Never ever in the history of Baluchistan there has been such a sort of brutality. So coming to your question, then this disappearance is part of this really extreme, baseless state, that artificial Frankenstein state that's been created in the region, because they have no value for human beings. There is no value for any human beings. It's not the Baluch that they suffer in that region. Okay, so it's what is now is called Pakistan. All religious sects, different religious sects, including Muslim, Pashtun, Sindhis. Okay, so all of them, they had a lot of people that disappeared. But with Baluch, the reason that Baluch, the number of the Baluch being disappeared, is the focus on the Baluch, because the Baluch nation is very secular and democratic and humane nation. So that's why the news doesn't come. If it was Islamofascist, then you could hear the news in the West. But since this, the Baluch nation is from the start, the movement is being based on secular, democratic, and humane basis. And for that reason, it's very, very difficult for the rest of the world to really follow what's going on. Okay. You see, from 1948, they started, killing Baluch. So as I said, there never ever been in the history of Baluchistan such a cruelty that we get it from Muslim establishment, Punjabi Muslim establishment, or rulers of the Pakistan, or since the Islamic regime of Iran came to power. Now, what happened? So coming exactly to the question, when it started in terms of officially disappearing Baluch, officially,
yes.
They did it unofficially.
Yes.
Officially, it started in 1946 when Asadullah Mengal, and he was the son of veteran Baluch political leader Ataullah Mengal, a radical individual, and of course he was fighting for the right of Baluch, and he was abducted and killed. And what they said, he ran and went to Afghanistan. Exactly the same thing that they're saying. And after ISA, the head of ISA, many years after that, he confirmed that they kidnapped Asadullah Mengal and they killed him, a young, a Baluch political activist, and also, you see, remembered he wasn't like ordinary individual as such way, and he was the son of really one of the leader of the political leader of the Baluchistan, Baluch, Ataullah Mengal. So since then it started in Baluchistan. Of course, what they did in Bangladesh, it was another story that the millions and millions of people they killed, and nobody was taken to court, or nobody was responsible, and that really helped them in a sense, to do it exactly the same.
Yeah.
So what happened then? After that, they continued that these individuals, the kidnapping and disappearing this individual. Then it came when Musharraf came to power, the military dictator Musharraf. And this Musharraf, as you know that, he's not from that region. Even he's not from, the West Punjab, by the way. He came from, his parents, they came from another part of India. So, but of course, like any military dictator in Pakistan, if you read what the leader, the prime minister of the Pakistan, usually they say when they choose this leader of the military, they think they're the most coward and the most servant, military leader, and that's why they choose them. And of course, they become, as soon as they get the power, of course, they do what they do. So when he came, then it became very systematic for a number of the reasons, by the way. So the movement of Baluchistan is much, much stronger than it used to be. So there are a lot more students, and the demand is much greater. So we are talking about since like 2000, the year 2000, they kept arresting and disappearing. And then it got to really his height. Then we see is from like 2007, 2008, 2006. Then more and more of Baluch intellectual, Baluch writers, journalists, students, and elderly Baluch that it never happened before. The elderly Baluch that they're maybe in 70s and 80s, and they're highly respected. And then maybe they're not as political as, like when you get to like students. So it was from that time. Then by 2009, the Baluch families, and one of the really important figure in terms of like setting up and having like a good, a major contribution in setting up that organization for the Baluch missing persons, and led it is Abdul Qadir Baloch, Mama Qadir. Mama Qadir, and at that time he was in his 70s. His son, Jalil Riki, he was abducted on 13 February 2009, and his body found on 22nd November 2011. But after that, because of all this family, they gathered together, and they're fearless. They're totally fearless, So this is not easy when you've got a black hole, which is created by Punjabi Muslim Establishment Army, and is extremely cruel, extremely cruel. I mean, it's not something that, I can describe it. I can't find any words, to describe, because we never, ever had in history of Baluchistan such a cruelty that that we've got it at the moment in the last 50, 60 years. Anyway, they organized that Mama Qadir, and in particular the role of Baluch women. One of this woman, and again one of this was an elderly woman. It was Bibi Mahtab Baisani. So what they did, in 22nd May 2010, a group of Baluch family of disappeared in Baluch. Yes. So they wanted to go to attend to one of the sessions related to the missing person, and what the security forces, Pakistani or Punjabi security forces, they did. They put some stuff in their car, and their car, after that, so how can I say it? Well, it turned upside down in a way on the way. So it was kind of like
kill her,
like accident, So Bibi Mahtab, she was in the 80s. She died. Then what the Baluch they did, you see, in the longest march in history, because there never been such a long march for recovery of their loved ones, political and human rights activists. So Baluch, from women,
was this all being linked into the? Sorry, quick one. Was this all being linked into the Voice for Baluch Missing Persons movement?
Exactly. This one was organized by Baluch, the Voice for Baluch Missing Persons. So they were children, women, and elderly. They had a long march. It's about 2,000 kilometers, by the way, or more than 2,000 kilometers. And they started in October 2013, and it lasted in February 2014. I started from capital city of Baluchistan, Shah Quetta. Then they went to Karachi. From Karachi, they went to capital city of Pakistan, Islamabad. So it was the longest march for recovery of disappeared Baluch or individuals, but you never heard it in any news or anything. So you just heard it, okay,
Yeah.
in some part.
And in the national media.
And then, even with this group, they're just the families. They're just families of this disappeared individual. Okay, they haven't been involved maybe any political activities and so forth. And even then, some members of the Baluch missing persons they're disappeared and killed.
Yeah.
Fakir Muhammad Shahwani,
Yeah.
okay, he was the financial secretary of this Baluch missing persons. And he was abducted in 23rd September 2010, and his mutilated body was found on 21st October 2010.
Yes.
Then Yasin Baluch, and he was a coordinator of Baluch missing persons in Kalat zone. And he was gunned down on 11th October 2010. So even those individuals, they're trying to find out what happened to their loved ones. Apart from the daily harassment and everything, they were abducted and killed, or they just were gunned down.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the number, you see, because Baluchistan is the whole Baluchistan. I'll just give provide a picture. Okay, I just paint a picture of Baluchistan. You see, we are in Baluchistan, in eastern part of Baluchistan. Okay, you see what we have. We've got all sorts of most fundamentalist Islamofascist groups which are organized by Punjabi establishment, Punjabi military establishment, Muslim establishment. You're talking about 60 different organizations, including Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
Okay. And in northern part, again, they created this Afghan Taliban, Mujahideen. So again, they are against the Baluch movement, because Baluch movement is secular democratic movement. And okay, so in western part, of course, what we have is this Islamofascist regime of Iran, or the mullahs. And in south, okay, we've got C, okay, the other side is Arab. So we are a small light in the midst of all brutality, criminality, okay, and darkness. And remember, just to give you, when I said the Baluch are secular, you said, just give you some couple of examples, for people to really to find out, okay, what they mean. So because we are so close to the Kurdish, okay, as we are the closest cousin, okay, of the Kurdish people, and we see the secularism there as well. You see, there is one cemetery, Jewish cemetery in Karachi, and of course, this fundamentalists, Pakistan fundamentalists, Punjab fundamentalists, they wanted to destroy it. And there was just one Baluch family that protected that. In Baluchistan, when the Hindus were attacked by their own brothers and sisters, for goodness sake, okay, the Punjabis, they are not any different. The only place they were protected is the one in Baluchistan. When the Baha'is were attacked and they came to Baluchistan, in Baluchistan they were protected. The Christians were protected, and other religions. So in Baluch language, there is a phrase. It says, Isapa Dini Musapa Dini. He said Jesus, is for his religion and Moses for his religion. Okay, so they say he's a human being, and we take every individual as human being. It's not it's not your business, to us. The people that can't believe anything is a human being. The first thing for the Baluch is a human being. And that secularity, that sort of humanity that exists, is for that reason these people are they're disappearing. Exactly for this precise. So there are now thousands and thousands of people that disappeared. Yeah. And nobody, from all the Punjabi establishment from the diaspora that they're outside, they are again at the same problem outside Pakistan, because again they are the cause of that same problem that we have it in Balochistan, because the same mindset, Islam or fascist mindset that exists within the rulers of Punjabi establishment of rulers of Pakistan is exist there. Either they are generalists or whatever they call them, but in terms of the mindset, there is not much difference from what you get it from the army of Pakistan, which is the Punjabi Muslim.
Yeah.
So for that reason, we have a major problem. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. If you've got any other question to ask.
No, I was going to say thank you very much, because that highlights the way in which the Pakistan state is being constituted. As you argue, it inherently leads to the targeting of it was artificially and geopolitically constructed. I know we're running out of time, and really thank you very much for all of that. Just as a final question, and you see many people would link that in or see parallels with what's happening in Rojava in Syria, which is really that because it has welcomed a whole range of different cultures, people of different beliefs, people of different ethnicities, and encourage them to live in there in a protected zone, that appears to represent a threat, not just to the Turkish state, but to a lot of international states, as Margaret Owen, a lawyer, highlighted. So it's really a terrible situation. My only other thing would be, why have other international states not held Pakistan to account? Is it mainly because Pakistan has been so crucial in the war on terror in the period of the Cold War? It was used. It was obviously a key launch pad for the US to be able to destabilize Russian-occupied Afghanistan. All those reasons. Is that why you see that Western Europe, the United States, and the international community have not really intervened? I mean, one other key point I know, which we've not mentioned today, is that Balochistan in occupied Pakistan represents something like 43 to 44% of the full land territories, together with its main areas for minerals, water, the key port facilities and everything like that. Is so much invested by the international community in terms of cynical geopolitics that they will not allow Balochistan to be free or to have this referendum. What are your views on that? And the other point would be, can you see the current way in which, I know you've highlighted how it would be impossible given the current structure of Pakistan, for anyone from Balochistan to not be targeted in the ways you've outlined. But in the current international political climate, is there any way in which the situation, do you think, can be improved in terms of ending these terrible human rights violations in Balochistan?
Yeah, I think a very, very good question. You see that, one thing, for people that's in, because there are really many, many factors that, that really help, assisted, because Pakistan is meaningless, I think use of the term Pakistan is one reason for people they think that there is a nationality like Pakistan. There is no such a thing as nationality like Pakistan. It doesn't exist. It's just an artificial construction. And is a legacy of the British Empire. There is nothing else. So the Punjabis are Indian, like any other Indian. And like Bengalis, they're Indian, like any other Indian. So that in that sense, there is no such a thing. But the reason, there are many, many factors really that that why Pakistan survived. Pakistan is not going to survive. I'm pretty certain is something that, okay, in lot people are not very certain, but I'm pretty certain Pakistan is one of the construction is not going to survive. So if people, they know exactly the nature of this artificial Frankenstein state, okay, mafia state, then they realize that, okay, so it's totally artificial. And since 1947, okay, that this artificial Frankenstein, really criminal state was created. You just look at the history. So you've got, as soon as the reason that, the Churchill said keep a bit of India, it was exactly precisely that, okay, to what was happening after that, because they felt that there is going to be a clash between Soviet Union and the Western countries like Britain and United States and so forth. So they needed a base, okay? And after that, in 1950s, again, you've got that clash. That clash existed between Soviet Union. And one thing that, okay, the Punjabi Muslim establishment, they've done it, they can turn their color anytime. They can one day, they're extreme, okay, fundamentalist Muslim, okay, so they fight against the Soviet Union, so they get any support from West. And another time, they support like the Chinese Maoists, and they just ignore that, okay, they're okay, the Turkish Muslim being slaughtered or genocide. So they can change anytime. So by changing the color, because this kind of the servitude mentality, so that exists, has been one of the reasons really for the survival of, okay, the Pakistan as it exists. And the other really very, very important, okay, because this state, okay, is a parasite state. He says since 1850s, what they've done, they were mercenaries. So after India was divided, after the partition, he said 30, 35%, 40% of the army of India was, okay, this Punjabi establishment. So this parasite state, you see, since its creation, what they've done, begging from this state, begging from another state, begging, okay, one day in the name of Islam, another day in the, I don't know, fighting against communism, another day is, I don't know. Yeah. Always that this mindset of changing the color at any time, okay, when the Islam is for them is a tool, they use it. When, I don't know, they colonialism, to pretend that, okay, they were colonized, they were not, but they used that one. When they use the term of the human rights, they use it for that reason, okay? So and when they realize that they can get a lot of money from the Arabs, they use Islam. Nowadays, okay, they use, okay, something else. You said the Turkish, they came to India and occupied, Ghaznavid occupied India. So we are part of that. And now that they take, okay, they use Turkey to take advantage. So that mindset that keep changing color is something that, okay, exists. And also remember the establishment, Punjabi rulers of Pakistan, Muslim, he said that they don't believe in Pakistan themselves. As soon as these people, they've got enough income, or as soon they pass their, okay, training and, okay, through the military, either they end up in Britain or the Canada or Australia, even they don't trust, you know, to leave them. So it's not something for them, you know, it's just to make, at the moment they're in charge. Of course, they make a lot of money from Baluchistan. And we thought Baluchistan, of course, they cannot survive. Remember, Baluchistan is the richest. In that region is one of the richest nation. Unfortunately, of course, is colonized. But another reason that I just wanted, you know, to put some emphasis, okay, is the whole region. You see, in the region we are, all the region from Middle East, okay, and all the region that Islam is being like dominant force. You see, we haven't got yet that the age of enlightenment. So the age of enlightenment, the age of reason, you really, it doesn't exist there. Okay, it's the process of the existence. Okay, people that started to question. It's not like in Europe in 17th, 18th century. So the people that started to question that, okay, why you've got this sort of brutality? Why nations, okay, that existed there for thousands of years, they haven't got their rights? Why you haven't got Baluchistan, they existed for thousands of years, Baluch or the Kurdistan, the Kurdish nation, why they haven't got their rights? They existed and they lived there for thousands of years, which they can have their own law and way of life and so forth. So one, that reason, that the absence of the age of reason, so that he hasn't. And another factor that, okay, I'm going to just to highlight, you see, all these borders, artificial borders, okay, after 16 and 15, that they divide that the whole region, Middle East,
yeah,
very artificial way. So dividing all different nations and cutting that, okay, dissecting them and putting them together is another problem. So unless you get colonial political structures, unless you get these colonial political structures and borders, of course you are not going to have the same rights. But it's not going to last long. It's not going to last long. Okay, the Arab movement, the movement at the moment that exists in Iran, okay, in Baluchistan, in Kurdistan, okay, the movement that, okay, that is going on in Arab world is the something that is going to change. So the age of enlightenment is coming. So that's why the nations like Kurdish nation, as I say, that this century is the century of liberation of the nations in that region, as we had it in Europe in 17th and 18th century and 19th century.
Yeah, and I think Öcalan, it's interesting that you mentioned the Kurdish connection there. As Öcalan has also stated, and I know as you've highlighted in the books you've written, the crisis of classic states constructed by these geopolitical imperial constructs. You know, you mentioned 1915, 16, 45, and, you know, other colonialisms have really reached a critical point where they're not functioning in all the types of ways you've indicated. They're not functioning in terms of human rights for the people they're supposed to represent, and in many ways they're imploding. So unfortunately we've got to end it there. I'd like to invite you again on a podcast to discuss these issues further, but really I'd just like to thank you very much for those perspectives, which I'm sure our listeners will really be interested in. So thank you very much there, Shahzavar.
Thank you so much for inviting us.